Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns, and you already know what I'm going to say next. I am just so excited to be here. And you know I'm saying that because I say it every day. I say it every day because I mean it every day. I really do get so pumped up to do these podcasts. Actually, and this is going to tie into today's episode after I get into a little housekeeping. But just so you know, I am excited, mentally, but physically, maybe not so much. But we're going to talk about that in a minute. First, some housekeeping. So today is Wednesday, February 24th, which just so happens to be 4 days before my birthday. Just so you know, I'm not looking for any gifts or anything, but if you felt moved to send a little happy birthday email, I would receive it with absolute gratitude and a lot of excitement. Speaking of excitement, but I want to let you know about a couple of other things that are going on. Number one, I want you to know that I am like minutes away from setting up my Patreon page. Really fully setting it up. Right now, I have this page that you can contribute to this work that I do. Some of my ideas here are to get better lighting, better camera, maybe some more editing kind of stuff, so I'm going to set some benchmarks in Patreon. I guess that's what people do is they say, okay, if I raise $1,000, I'll get this thing, or something like that. So I don't think what I'm looking for is going to cost $1,000, but I'll let you know. I'll put that in there. But I want to let you know, though, that I'm also going to set up on Patreon. The way Patreon works is there are tiers of, not tears that you cry, but tiers of, different levels of contribution that you can make. And depending on those contribution levels, there's going to be certain, rewards that come from it, right? And so the first thing I want to say is that I'm going to there's now 2 patrons on my Patreon. I'm so excited. I've doubled my patronage, and it just happened today. So thank you. You know who you are. Thank you very much. I don't know if she wants me to tell you. I don't know if she even knows that I know this yet, but I'll get permission from her and I'll let you know who it is. Maybe. But the other thing, what I want you to understand though about Patreon is that again, there's going to be these different levels, and I'm going to set a level that is going to entitle everyone who meets that level of donation. It's going to entitle you to a little special something, not necessarily special different content, although I will give you access to my Google Drive of all the different practices I have, which includes guided meditations, meditation scripts, and stuff like this, okay? But it's also going to include a monthly coaching session, okay? So one night a month, I'm going to pick that time. It's going to be tricky. We're going to have to figure out because I have one patron in Europe and one patron in the Mountain Time Zone here in the U.S. So there's about an 8-hour difference there. So I'm going to have to figure out a time that works for everyone and, of course, everybody in between. Pardon me. But the idea is that we're going to pick a day, one day a month where we're going to do about depending on how many people, it could be up to about a 2-hour session where I'm going to give you actual coaching. Okay. So, pardon me again, this is going to be a very valuable thing. Okay. So that patronage, I haven't set the tier up yet, but it's going to be somewhere. I don't know what it's going to be just yet. Let's say just for the sake of argument, it's $100 a month, right? But here's the thing: both patrons that I have now are not at that level, and so here's what I'm going to do: I'm going to grandfather in the first 3 additional patrons that join. Okay, so you can join for even as little as like $5 or $10 a month. Literally, there's no minimum, no maximum. And if you get in the next the first 3 people, in addition to the first 2 that I have, that's going to make the initial group of 5 people that are going to be in that group, regardless of what you donate. But as of maybe Monday, that price is going to be a certain price that's going to a certain level of contribution. So if you have any questions about this, let me know. But really, the long and short of it, pardon me again. the long and short of it is that for the first 3 people who join my Patreon page, which I will put a link in the comments, they're going to automatically get into this tier, even if they're just donating like $5 or $10 a month. Okay, so that's my way of trying to grow this community a little. Now, additionally to that, there will be maybe about 10 more spaces for that kind of higher level thing, and I'll give you the details. But again, I'm going to put the the link to join the Patreon community in the comments of this video, whether you're on YouTube or the description in the podcast, wherever you're seeing this, okay? Or in the email that you receive. All right, so that was one of the big things I wanted to tell you about. But the other couple of things, I have mentioned here a couple of times that I'm involved with a new project, okay? A dear friend of mine out here in Colorado, his name is Adam Asdell, great guy. He's a great videographer and photographer. You've probably seen some of his work on TV and stuff like that. Amazing stuff, great dude. So he and I are collaborating on a project here called Learn to Surf, or Learning to Surf, right? And so the idea is that there's a podcast, but there's also a couple of meetups that we're doing, completely free on a donation basis. The idea here is that, Adam is a practicing Buddhist and a Buddhism teacher, right? Whereas I am not a practicing Buddhist and do not teach Buddhism. I teach mindfulness from a scientific sort of secular way. Pardon me again, folks. So Adam with his Buddhist teaching and knowledge, and me with my science-based knowledge and teaching, we come together and we kind of talk about where the two disciplines of this work kind of meet up. Okay, and they're great conversations. I've got some great feedback over the first 2 episodes of the podcast. I will put a link to that in the description. But I also want you to know that as part of this project, there are 2 meetups every single week. There's one that I host on Wednesday evenings, which is happening tonight, 7 p.m. Mountain Time. That's 9 o'clock on the East Coast, 6 o'clock on the West Coast. Very secular mindfulness. We're going to talk about, it's a very informal conversational thing. It's very interactive. You get to participate or not if you don't want to. But we're going to talk about a little bit of, a little bit of the science of mindfulness each week. Each week, I will guide everybody through a meditation, about 10 minutes, 15 minutes or so, and then we'll do question and answers. And so I want to make sure that you know that you are cordially invited to that. And again, it happens every Wednesday at 7 p.m. There will be a link in the description. And then every Saturday morning, although this week we're not sure if it's going to happen, maybe on Sunday due to Adam's travel schedule. We'll know for sure tonight. But every weekend, Saturdays mostly, at 9 a.m. Mountain Time, which is 11 on the East Coast and 8 in the Pacific, we're hosting more of a Buddhist kind of meetup, right? So it's going to have more Buddhist teachings, but also with a guided meditation, also with question and answer. So you're invited to all of this, okay? So, pardon me again. So I just wanted you to know that all of that is out here and available for you, okay? And again, all the links will be in the description, I promise you. All right, so here we are, everybody. Thank you again for joining me, and thank you for sitting through 8 minutes of housekeeping announcements. I hope some of that excites you, because it's really exciting stuff. These meetups that we're doing are really, really fun. Actually, the first one for me is tonight, but the ones that Adam has done on Saturday mornings have been super fun, super engaging. You get lots of different people in these groups. People who have everything from a lot of experience to people who have never even, heard of this stuff before, like brand spanking new. So there's something for everyone is my point. And I would really love to watch this community grow, because there's something really amazing when a group of people get together to do the same thing with the same mindset, with the same, kind of levels of engagement and compassion and everything else. That when that happens, there's something really, really beautiful that happens in a community like that. And from a learning perspective, learning in a community has been shown unambiguously to be very, very much more powerful than learning just one-on-one. It's just, you just get there's a group dynamic that happens. Not only is it just inherently more sort of advantageous for learning, but there's also something really amazing that happens in a group setting like that. Pardon me, folks. I'm sorry about my throat here. I've just got a little bit of tickle. This dry air out in Colorado gets me all the time. But one of the other things that happens that's truly amazing in a group context is that when you ask a question, right? When you ask a question that comes to your mind, somebody else in the group is learning from your question, right? A lot of times we don't even realize that we had a question to ask until we hear somebody else ask a question. And that might even be it might be the exact question that we wanted to ask, or it could inspire a new question that we want to ask. And so there's something really, really special and amazing about, getting together in a group like that. And as I said, right now it's completely free. We're going to set up a donation system so that people can kick into a hat if they want. But it's something that Adam and I are doing just, out of the just the love in our heart for this work. So again, great resource, great opportunity for people. You get a meditation out of it. You get to maybe make some friends, and you get this sense of community, which is really, really beautiful and positive. So again, I hope I see you there. So what are we going to talk about today? So it's interesting. I said before how I get excited every day, and I do. I mean, that's not at all disingenuous of me to say that, right? Like every day when I'm, hitting the buttons to start this thing, I get that rush of excitement, right? However, it's not to say that every day I feel the same way about myself and about how I'm going to deliver this message. Like everyone else, my body is going to always, my body is always going through cycles and rhythms and changes and is affected by, the the food that I eat, the water that I drink or don't drink, the tea that I drink or don't drink. I don't drink coffee anymore. I don't drink alcohol anymore. But I'm going to be impacted by not only all the things that I consume, but also, as we've talked to you about here, all of the digital consumption. Right. So like on a day, for instance, where, maybe there's some like the day of the Capitol riots here in the U.S., last month. Right. That day, I probably wasn't feeling the same as I was, say, yesterday, when I'm feeling very positive, very, enthusiastic about it. So it's, there is an excitement, right? There's always that emotional excitement that I have, which definitely impacts my body. Right. But where that emotional excitement hits me is going to be different depending on my energy level, right? And the energy level in my body is what is impacted by, eating, drinking, sleeping, or not sleeping, maybe staying up too late and watching a movie, or maybe watching something on TV that disturbs me, right? That maybe, getting some bad news from somebody or some unfortunate news of some sort, right? Like these things are always going to impact my energy, just like they impact your energy, just like they impact everyone's energy, right? But the emotion of excitement is still there, which is really kind of cool, right? And that kind of tells something that is really interesting. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about today is that, a lot of times, and this actually happened to me just last week, right? When I was doing the podcast with Adam, because this podcast that I do here that you're listening to right now, or if you're watching on video, it's just me, just doing like a monologue, just kind of talking, right? The other podcast that I do with Adam is much more traditional podcast where it's a conversation, right? It's almost like, it's not quite an interview because we're co-hosts, although we will be interviewing people shortly, but it's a back and forth. It's a conversation. And so and so just last week, right? Like, so we did the first one 2 weeks ago, and it felt great. I felt great being there. My energy was high, my excitement was high, my emotion, my enthusiasm was high. Everything was going great, and it felt great. And then when I listened back to it, it sounded great. And I was like, this is awesome. I'm so excited about this, right? But then last week it was a little different, right? Last week, I believe it was on Thursday that we recorded, just like we're doing tomorrow. And whatever it was that was going on in my life last Thursday, I don't even remember. And that's another lesson. I'm going to write that down for a future podcast here. Is that a lot of times in the moment something seems very disturbing to us, right? But if we give our, but if in a week or so we're looking back on that thing, we can't even remember what was so disturbing, right? That's a real thing. And that's, again, we'll talk about that some other time. But the point that I'm making here is that, I didn't feel good. Right. I felt very, low energy. I felt very, I was probably a little tired. I was probably quite busy, Thursdays and Fridays. I always have a lot of appointments, a lot of, work appointments with clients here, online sessions, and, and so for whatever reason, who knows, again, maybe I had eaten something, maybe something was going on with the kids, or maybe something was going on with my house, or what have you. Right. Maybe one of my plants wasn't looking too good that day or something like that. But whatever the reason was, which I don't remember, I wasn't feeling good. Right. And so, of course, I went through the process of the podcast anyway, because it's an obligation. It matters how I feel, but it doesn't matter. Like, it's not going to prevent me from fulfilling my obligations. And that's true about everything we do, right? That's true about being a parent. That's true about going to work. I mean, you can't just not go to work on a day where you're just like feeling a little off, right? Like, unless you're really sick, you have an obligation to your work. And so showing up is a big part of that. As you know, I'm a big fan of showing up, right? And so the idea is that, I showed up and I did the podcast, right? Even though I didn't feel good, I did the podcast anyway. And after that, I was really, after the podcast was over, I almost felt like a sullen feeling. Like I was really down. I was really like, gosh, I didn't do that well. I'm sure it doesn't sound good. I didn't show up with my normal energy, and I feel like I let everyone down, including myself. And it really kind of upset me. It was really kind of like, wow, I don't feel so good. Now, I didn't get all wrapped up in it, right? That's my mindfulness practices that allowed me to kind of just notice it and accept it and let it go, right? But I was definitely feeling like I'm not happy with my performance. I was almost like, I don't want to tell anybody about this podcast episode because I don't want them listening to this one for the first time and being like, oh, it's not that great, And so the thing though that matters here, right? The thing that's important here is that when I had that feeling about my own performance, right? But the funny thing is that 2 or 3 different people contacted me afterward and said, dude, that podcast is amazing. I just listened to the second episode. You guys are awesome. I can't wait for the next episode. And I was like, what? What? Really? Because it didn't feel that way to me, right? So I went back and listened to it. And sure enough, I mean, we're all our own biggest critics, of course, and I could pick out things that I said, like I would have said that differently in another frame of mind or whatever, but overall, I was like, yeah, the energy, it feels good. It doesn't feel like it was, flopping. It doesn't feel like I was just drowsy and not, into it the way that it felt as I was doing it. Right. And again, it's different between enthusiasm and energy. I want you to make sure that you understand the difference that I'm talking about, right? Enthusiasm is the emotional, kind of engagement that you feel like, to get yourself excited about it. I can do that anytime, right? but that enthusiasm jumps off from a certain place, right? And so 2 weeks ago, it jumped off from a very high level of energy, and it felt amazing. But last week, it jumped off from a much lower point of energy, and so it didn't feel as amazing. But the enthusiasm is the same. It's the energy level that's different. But the thing that I want to talk about here, the important thing here, is that I'm the only one who noticed that. And that's pretty amazing, right? Because, like, again, I was sure that I was sure I mailed it in. I was like, it's not right. Literally, I was that close to calling my partner and saying, let's re-record it. Like, that's how much I felt about this. And so to hear from other people that no, it sounded really good, and not in the context where I was saying, oh, I don't think I did wear it. No, people were just coming to me unsolicited and be like, hey, dude, I just heard your podcast from yesterday. It sounds amazing. My wife was one of them, but of course now she's always going to be honest with me, but she's always going to be nice too. But I also heard from people who have nothing to gain by telling me that they like something that they didn't like. I wouldn't expect these people to call me up and say, hey, that podcast was horrible, right? But I would expect them to simply not say anything. Right, like that is very, very, very expected, and that would be very, very understandable. And so the idea here is, and I want to share another story about this because this is something that I've always kind of known about this in a idealist or a theoretical sense, right? Now, some of you who know me know this. Most of you who don't know me don't know this, but I happen to be a very avid fan of the good old Grateful Dead. Now, the Grateful Dead, there's certain stigma about the Grateful Dead, because, the culture of the Grateful Dead had a lot to do with, partying and like traveling around the country in dirty vans and stuff like that, and while that's all true and all part of it, that's not all there is to it. And that's one of the unfortunate things about the Grateful Dead. And this is not a podcast about the Grateful Dead, and I'm not trying to promote them, but I do want to say this, though, that, the unfortunate thing about that is that, the Grateful Dead made some really amazing music. They really did. And not just the music, but the lyrics, they're things that really very powerful. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't engage in the Grateful Dead because of all of that stigma, right? And so, I mean, whatever, it's okay. I mean, right now there's no real Grateful Dead doing their thing anymore. I mean, there's this older version of them. I don't get into that, but Dead and Co. They call it Dead and Slow because these guys are all very old and they're not playing the way they used to anyway. So you can go listen to go to YouTube and you can find all kinds of music of the Grateful Dead for free that you can listen to, and I encourage you to do that because there is some really amazing stuff. But really, the reason I bring the Grateful Dead up is that they made a movie back in, I think it was 1975 or 1976, when they decided to take a year off of touring. Now, the thing about the Grateful Dead was that they were always on tour, right? They played like, I don't know, a few hundred shows a year, right? Just every year in, year out, just traveling, 3 tours a year, right? They would do a spring tour, a summer tour, a fall tour, and then in between they would play like, on the West Coast and stuff like that. So, I mean, a lot of work, right? And so in 1975, I'm pretty sure it was, they decided that they need to take a break, right? So they played, like 5 last shows before their break in San Francisco, and they filmed it, and they made a movie out of that, right? And in this movie, Jerry Garcia, who was the, kind of leader of the band, it was really a leaderless band, but he was, the iconic figure of the band. He said something in that film about exactly what I'm talking about here. He said that, and I don't remember exactly the quotes or anything, but he was, it was an interview that he was just talking, and he was saying how, there was one show that they played, a few months back at the time, and he felt it was so listless and so lazy and so low energy walking off the stage, he actually shoved the bassist down a flight of stairs. And at the time, he's like, why did I do that? I mean, I'm tight with this guy. I love this guy. I don't know why I did it, but I was so upset with the performance. It just felt like we just didn't do it that night. And it really upset him. But then he said he went back and listened to the recording, and his words were, it was crackling with energy. And so the same thing, he said exactly the same thing that I'm saying to you right now is that, and he literally said, it doesn't matter how I feel. He says, of course it matters to me, but it doesn't matter to the performance how I feel, right? And so that's why I want you to know today that the same is true for you. Right? When you're showing up to something, when you're showing up with your family, you're showing up with your job, you're showing up with, going out with some friends to play bowling or whatever it is that you're doing, right? The way that you feel, that energy inside of you, right, is not really indicative of how people perceive you. Right. And understand that, because we don't have a recording to go back and listen to. Right. I'm fortunate that I have a recording of my podcast. Jerry Garcia had a recording of the rock and roll show that he played. So it's very easy for us to go back and say, I was wrong. That's so cool. Right. So you don't get that. Right. We generally in humans, in society, we don't get that. Right. Like, you're not recording yourself going to work on a particular day and then getting a chance to play it back and see, okay, how did I really come off even though my energy was low. Right. And so the lesson here, the thing that I want you to understand is that, it's important to feel the energy, right? It's important to know that, okay, I'm not in a high level of energy today, and that's okay, right? And this kind of comes back to acceptance, right? That we can accept that we're not in a high level of energy. Again, does that mean that we don't show up to work? Does that mean that we don't play the rock and roll show? Does that mean that we don't do the podcast? No, it doesn't have to mean that. Right. And the reason I'm telling you this is because I want you to not be so afraid. Right. When you're feeling like, oh, I'm not up to this today. I don't think I have it in me to do this today. Right. You might feel that way, but you might be really surprised at how other people perceive you. Right. And again, remembering that the energy level is different from the enthusiasm level. And you can always be enthusiastic. That's something you can conjure up for yourself, right? Just like thinking and just like breathing is a really kind of a curious thing that happens, right? Like, these things are all, whether it's our emotions, the sensations of our body, the thinking, the breathing, all of it, right? These are all things that we can do consciously. Right? Like, if I ask you, take a deep breath using your abdomen right now, you can do that, right? You can make your body do that thing, right? If I ask you, think about a flower right now, you can conjure up a thought of a flower. If I tell you, just try to feel happy about something right now, you could call to mind something and just and feel that happiness for a moment, right? And so we're able to control these things when we want to, but at the same time, these things all happen without our control, right? So I'm not telling you right now how to breathe, but yet you're breathing. At any given time, a thought could pop into your mind that's about a flower or anything else, and at any given time, you're feeling some level of emotion. Whether it's happy or not, you're feeling something. And that doesn't change just because you're not trying to do it, right? And so understanding that, and understanding that this body that we have, it's doing its thing whether we're involved or not, right? And so understanding that is really helpful in this context that I'm talking about here, right? Because that is the energy level, right? That like, this is just what's happening today, right? I'm feeling down. I'm just feeling tired. I'm feeling like I want to go to bed. I want to just, put the covers over my head and, wait till tomorrow. We all have those feelings sometimes, right? And that's your energy, right? But you can You can say, but there's people who are counting on me. There are people who are relying upon my showing up and performing to the best of my ability, right? And that's all we can do, right? That's all we can do is just show up to the best of our ability, right? And because that's, again, we can't control what we read on the news. I mean, we can control whether we don't read the news, right? But we don't have necessarily full control over, what we were able to eat or how that food affected our energy. We're not necessarily in control of how much sleep we get every night. Right. And so this energy level of your body, that's part of that automatic thing that happens in your body. You don't control that. Right. I mean, there's things you can do. Of course, you can drink caffeine. You can, go exercise. You can do things to change that. But again, there's still this autopilot that happens. Right. And so understanding that, but yet being able to conjure up the excitement or the enthusiasm, I should say, not the excitement, but the enthusiasm to conjure that up on demand. That's what showing up to life is part of. That's definitely part of the deal here, right? And that's where, there's this great TED Talk I watched a few weeks ago about a writer was giving this talk, and she was talking about genius. Right. And she was somebody who her first book, hit a home run. She became a national bestseller, and so a lot of writers, she was talking about, artists and writers who have committed suicide because they reach such a high level of success and they don't think they're ever going to make that again. Right. And that's a very dangerous thing for somebody. Right. And so she was taught, she really explored this concept and really did a lot of research on it. And what she came up with, in fact, at one point, genius the word was actually thought to be like a genie in your walls. Like, great writers of the past, felt that there were these creatures living in their walls and they would only come out sometimes. Right. So they write every single night, but only sometimes does that genius come out and touch us and create this brilliance. Right. And so understanding that too is very important, right? That it's not about, it's not about only showing up when we feel great and we're inspired and we're feeling like we're going to do something genius today. Right? Because if that's the case, then most of us are going to spend most of our time inside because we don't feel that way all the time. And it's okay not to feel that way all the time. But the important thing is to show up all the time just in case. Right? Like here, I do this podcast every single day, 5 days a week, whether I'm feeling, brilliant and excited and I got a topic that's like, I can't wait to share this with you, or like today, honestly, I'm not feeling that inspired. This is it's an important topic. I'm glad I'm talking about it. It's not the most inspired topic that I've ever covered, but I'm here and I'm doing it. And you know what? Maybe there's somebody who heard what I said today and this is exactly what they needed to hear. Like 100%, not a syllable difference. That this is exactly what they needed to hear. And perhaps something that they heard today is going to change their life. So who am I to not show up based on what I'm feeling, right? And this doesn't just apply to podcasters and musicians, right? This is true for your family. This is true for your job. This is true for your friends. This is true for just you, right? Life is out there waiting for you. And if you don't show up to it, then you miss it. And it misses you. Right? Which is the important part, right? Because we could all be okay, right? Like, you can all turn on Netflix and, draw the shades and, chill out at home. We'll all survive something like that. In fact, sounds pretty attractive right now. But the point is, though, that life would miss me if I did that, right? This podcast would miss me. My clients would miss me. My kids would miss me. My wife would miss me. If I go to the store today, right? And again, we don't know when genius is going to show up, but when I go to the store later to pick up broccoli and asparagus and almond milk for my family, who knows whether I'm going to get into a conversation in that grocery store that changes someone's life, that changes my life, that changes everyone's life. We have no idea. right? And so that's why we got to show up. And that's why we got to show up with our presence and with our acceptance, with our compassion, and with our curiosity. And most of all, we show up with our happiness. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I'll be back again tomorrow to talk about some more. I'm actually going to conjure Jerry Garcia one more time for you because I got an interesting interview that I just saw with him that they talk about how music was Jerry Garcia's yoga. And I'm going to tell you what that means tomorrow. It's probably not what you think, and it's really amazing. So anyway, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Wish you well. I'll be back again tomorrow. Take care. And don't forget, tonight is the meetup. Saturday's the meetup, the podcast. All the links will be in the description. All right, everybody. Thanks again for watching. I wish you well. Take care.